Hey everybody, the Rahdo Q&A is brought to you by Elf Creek Games. And hello there everybody! I am about to answer a bunch of questions that have been submitted by viewers like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And if my answers prompt any more questions, or if you would just like to hear some general thoughts about games, or the channel, or life, the universe, and everything, then by all means send your emails in to questions@rahdo.com, and in a future episode, I will do my best to answer them. And sometimes I'll be joined by my wife, Jen, as well. So, without any further ado, let's get to those Q's and A's. And so, let's continue with question 2. This is a continuation of the Luck in Co-ops series from Daniel, part 4, the resurrection. All right, Daniel, what do we got? First of all, I think you should read the entire thing before answering, since the last 3 times you misunderstood the point of my question. Daniel, I apologize. You know what I'm going to do, Daniel? I'm going to pause now and read preface number 2 and the crux of your argument, the follow-up bullet points, and then it looks like we go on to number 3 is changing the subject. Am I going to read it out loud? Yes, I'm going to. All right, so read the whole thing before I comment. I will stifle the urge to comment. All right. The spirit of my question isn't that you can lose in these games with the cards per se. If you're playing well, you can't. The spirit to my question is, what purpose does inserting these cards/mechanisms serve apart from being frustrated? What's the point of being close to winning and doing really well, and all of a sudden you're close to losing due to no fault of your own? That's akin to changing the rules of a game 10 minutes before the game ends at random. Ahem. The particular card in question in Aeon's End is a Stage 3 power card called Dire Abattoir. And this is quoting the text of the card. To discard, which for folks who don't know, in Aeon's End, bad cards come out, but you have time to respond to them. If you do certain things, you can make them go away before they hit you. So, Dire Abattoir. To discard, i.e. defeat this before it hits you, spend 8 ether, which is mana. That's very expensive. So what it's saying is, it comes out, you've really got to make a huge investment to get rid of this card before it blows up. Power 2. Okay, and Power 2 means you have very little time to do it. So I can certainly see, Daniel, why you chose this, because this is a card that could come out, it would only potentially come out late, near the end of the game, because it's a Stage 3, when you're close to winning or losing, right? And it can really hit you hard, I'm assuming, because, okay, if it actually gets off its attack, if you can't pony up 8 ether, which is doable, it's certainly doable, but I broke my own rule, I'm commenting. All right, I was just trying to describe, okay, so anyway, if you don't beat it in time, the player with the most life suffers damage equal to their current life. All right, level 3. So, now Daniel continues. If you say you haven't prepared enough to pay, etc., my response is, sometimes you can't prepare. The boss can go multiple times in a row, or your multiple current hands might lack 8 ether, and boom! You could be at full life and instantly die. Some mages can technically be out of the game if that happens. Daniel, there you go. All right. So, I found this one while searching. I found other ones while searching for this one. You can skip this. I'm not skipping. I'm reading everything, Daniel. You said to read everything. Breach Tunnel Power 4. So you have 4 rounds basically to get ready for it. If each player has at least one closed breach, you instantly lose. It's another level 3. So it's another end of game Hail Mary from the bad guy. You might be playing with mages that play with few breaches open, and then you have to open your breaches instead of trying to win the game. Divert Attack. So there's another card. The player with the most expensive prepped spell casts that spell on themselves. And that one comes in the middle of the game. That's a level 2 instead of a level 3 card. This cannot be prevented, and you can instantly die if you have a high damage spell. Right. Okay. And then Daniel moves on to question 3 about the best games of all time. Okay. All right. So it's a good point. I said, hey, Daniel, show me those receipts, man. And you did. You gave me that. Okay. Here's the deal, though. Here's the first thing about most of these cards, not all of these cards. Dying does not end the game. You know this, Daniel. The reason Aeon's End can get away with such a huge nuke that feels totally unfair is because when you run out of hit points, you don't die in Aeon's End, you get exhausted. And there are some bad things. I think, if I recall correctly, you end up losing one of your breaches, and maybe you lose a prepped spell, and you can't be healed anymore. But you don't stop playing the game. You can still keep playing. The only really bad thing that happens when you get exhausted is, from that point on, if anything hits you, you don't take damage anymore. Instead, Gravehold, the central thing that everybody's trying to protect, takes twice as much damage. If you were going to take 3 damage, then Gravehold takes 6 damage. But you're still playing. You haven't instantly lost. That's the very nature of this. This power abattoir is designed to ensure it's not, by its very definition, an insta-kill. Because it's not like it says, hey, the player with the most life suffers damage equal to their current life plus 5. Because if that were the case, then, I would instantly die, 5 more damage would go through as 10, and that would probably end Gravehold and we'd instantly lose. That would have been an instant lose card. Dire Abattoir is not. Dire Abattoir is something that, well, first of all, high-level play means you prepare for it. You know it's there. If you think that's going to cause you problems, then that means throughout the game, you spend more of an effort than you otherwise would making sure you have a high ether-producing card to avoid that issue. That would be one way to address this. Advanced planning. And then when the thing comes out, you say, we got this. I knew they were going to open up that abattoir, and that's why we've got all these really, really high-yield ether cards, which have some other kind, which meant we played the game completely differently. So what is the value of this card? Well, if you want to be prepared for it, it forces you to play Aeon's End in a new and different way. And I would argue that's a good thing, to force you to shake up your normal strategy because a super nuke card is coming. But even still, this is not that bad. You just get exhausted and the fight continues. And now, there's a little bit more pressure. Everybody knows that, okay, they have to make sure you don't take any more damage. Maybe your way to resolve this card is less about preparing for it with higher level ether and more about preparing for it with cards that let you divert damage and one player can protect another, so that player who will get exhausted can't be a problem later on. But the other thing too, Daniel, these are level 3s. The game is almost over when this card comes out. You've already won or lost before this card came out based on the choices you made before. Because by the time you get to level 3, there's only a few rounds left in the game. And either you have built enough strength in your decks that you have the momentum and you're going to cross the finish line, and this is just a speed bump, a very dramatic speed bump. And you ask, what is the point of this? What value does it add to the game? It creates drama. It creates excitement. It's a situation where, okay, we've got this in the bag. I think we're going to win this. Oh my gosh! Dire Abattoir. Okay, if we don't deal with this, let's figure out what is going to happen. All right, that means Daniel, Daniel has the most life. Daniel is a player who has been really careful about staying healed up, and he will instantly take 10 points of damage, and this will instantly KO him. All right, are we prepared for this? Can we prepare for this? What do we do? Do we think we can stop this? If not, and this is a thing that's very, very similar to the end game of Shadowrun Crossfire, because Shadowrun Crossfire, if one player gets KO'd, it's not game over. If at least one other player can survive the next round, you can still pull off a win. It's just, it changes the nature of the end game. You thought you knew where things were going, and then the big bad throws a monkey in your wrench, and all of a sudden you've got to rethink stuff. And that, to me, that is exciting. That is dramatic. And now, thinking about this, here's another thing. This card is particularly pernicious, yay for alliteration, if you have played such that, we're near the end of the game and most of us are really low on life, but there's Daniel and he's really been focusing entirely on healing and staying alive no matter what. And then all of a sudden, this is a really bad card because it does 10 points of damage. But here's the deal. Here's another way to play when you know Dire Abattoir might be coming, Daniel. Play so that, make sure that the damage done is equally spread across your team, right? Because under those circumstances, then what's going to happen is, hey, if we're near the end of the game, we're all John McClane at the end of the first Die Hard. We can barely walk. We've still got glass in our shoes. We're shouting Holly as we try our final showdown with Hans Gruber and all that. That's the situation we're in. If we're all near death, then you know what? This thing coming out only does 2 or 3 points of damage. And that's nothing. That's stuff that all the cards do to you throughout the game. By an equal case, if everybody on my team was down to 2 hit points and a card came out that says, hey, do 4 points of damage, is that unfair? No, it's not. It just means we were in a situation where we couldn't deal with that. Daniel, Dire Abattoir, I've just given you several different ways that you can build towards that to be prepared for it so that it won't throw you for a wrench. But then I'm going to ignore all of that because it doesn't throw you for a wrench. If you lose after Dire Abattoir makes somebody exhausted, you are very likely going to lose anyway, because one player getting exhausted unexpectedly at the end of the game, that's part of the nature. If you're finding you finish Aeon's End a lot and you almost never get exhausted, it's time, Daniel, for you and your friends to bump up to the next difficulty level. Because when you're playing at peak, when you're playing a properly balanced game of Aeon's End, there should be some people who get exhausted by the end of the game, and this is just going to be one more, and it's not going to be the end of the game unless there's only, one. Although, hey, if you're playing solo and you're playing true solo, then this card doesn't bother you at all because if everybody gets exhausted, we lose rule doesn't exist in solo. So this isn't even a nasty card in solo. It just means, oh crap, the bad guy is kicked into overdrive, and from now on, the city I'm protecting is going to take double damage instead of single damage, and we better finish this fast because this card, and most of the cards you mentioned come out at the end of the game. The same thing is true for this breach tunnel. Right, as you say, you might be playing mages that play with few breaches open, and then you have to open your breaches instead of trying to win the game. Yeah, so all that means is, hey, there's an exciting wrinkle that everything has changed. We thought we knew. To me, obviously, Daniel, you and I are different people. I think that's exciting. When a big bad guy, whether it's in a board game we're playing or a movie we're watching, can surprise you, the audience, and say, but now here's this thing. And oh my gosh, I thought we had it in the bag. The hero was totally going to win, but then this thing happened. That's high drama, high stakes. That is exciting. And to me, that improves the quality of the game. And I appreciate maybe it doesn't improve the quality of the game for you, but in the case of this, hey, if you know there's a chance that a breach tunnel might come out, then that changes the way you play the game. Make sure that you've got all your breaches open, and it means characters who don't want all their breaches open because they get benefits from not opening. Well, you know what? They're going to have to change with the times because they know you don't get to choose your battlefield. This is the battlefield we're on? Okay, Mage X is going to have to change their normal tactics. That's another thing that makes this better. You ask, why is this an improvement to the game, Daniel? Because it shakes you out of your complacency. I know how this mage works. This mage is only ever supposed to have 2 breaches open, and they always leave the other 2 closed because they get this other power. It's like, oh, not this game. This game, we better prepare. We're going to have to change the way that Billy Bobo, plays. And I think that's a good thing, forcing you to reanalyze and reevaluate how you think, you should strategize. These are all good things. So, anyway, hopefully that answered your question. On number 4, Daniel, your true question wasn't, hey, does it exist? I don't believe you've proven that it exists with these particular examples. Because, the breach one does instantly lose. But the reality is, you should know that. You should know that, and you should plan for it, and then it won't bother you. It will not be a danger if you which has been my answer up till now. But your real question has always been, why do this in the first place? And hopefully, at long last, I've answered why I believe developers include surprise twists that, as you've pointed out, tend to come in at the end when you've practically already won and they just need to throw something at you to mix it up. And I think those are great. These all sound like really cool, exciting, dramatic twist cards. I love them. Okay, question number 3 from Daniel. The best game of all time, thought experience, continues. What type of game would that... All right, this is a continuation from last month. Right, you just asked broadly, hey, what parameters would a greatest game of all time, a true objective for all players everywhere throughout history, what would make for the great? And I just talked broadly about interaction and playtime and stuff like that. But now you're asking, what type of game would the potential greatest game of all time be, i.e., what mechanisms would it have? So what you're really saying, you're not asking me to say, hey, what are the greatest board game mechanisms? But what board game mechanisms lend themselves to a truly universal experience? And there's no such thing. No, there is no board game mechanism in the universe that 100% of potential players will say, yeah, that's good, I like that. Everything has detractors. So, it truly can't be. But, within the confines of this thought experiment, honestly, and this is a funny thing because worker placement is not my favorite, but it is hard to beat worker placement as maybe arguably the premier, greatest board game mechanism that our industry has created to date. And I'll tell you why. It's avatars. Because, of course, there are many, many games where you actually have an avatar. Monopoly, you have an avatar. I am the shoe. I am the dog. I am the car. And I remember as a young child arguing when we played Monopoly, hey, I really want to be the car. I do not want to be the shoe, or whatever it was. And it's meaningless, of course, except it's not, because it is so important to the human experience of playing these games that you have a way to be able to project yourself into that world, that you have an avatar. That's why people argue over who gets the boot and who gets the car, or the top hat, or the dog especially, whatever. And didn't they, for some anniversary, didn't they vote and there was some new one added? I forget. So, avatar-based representation of a player in the simulation, in the environment, matters. So, then why do I say worker placement? Because worker placement, I think the most important thing about it that nobody ever seems to talk about is it is a way to have your cake and eat it too as a game designer. Because a worker placement game, you generally speaking don't really exist. You are just a general force of nature or force of economics. You are the invisible hand of the market, or you are, out of touch nobility, or whatever it is. You're a person that is making high level decisions that will ultimately, lead to victory points, right? At the end of the day, first of all, I am going to say that the mechanism of victory points is going to be a better candidate for overall true universality, greatest board game of all time, than the opposite of that, which is effectively race. Cross a finish line. That could mean with a car, or could just mean complete a particular objective before other players do, or complete a set of objectives, or whatever. There's largely two ways to do it. Either play for a fixed amount of time and tally up your points at the end of the game, i.e., pretty much all of professional sports throughout all of human history, or come up with a specific series of goals that must be completed, and you're racing to complete those goals, which again have existed for all of history because foot races are objective-based gameplay. Whereas basketball and baseball and football and hockey and pretty much everything else we think of as modern sports are, hey, we're going to play for a fixed amount of time and then we're going to tally up points at the end of the game. I think of those two approaches, a truly more universal and approachable system is points, because it gives a broader range of players more of a sense of, depending on how they're implemented, more of a sense of engagement with the world, because they're constantly getting feedback. Am I 50% of the way towards my second objective of the 3 that I have to do to trigger a win? That's very amorphous, and it's satisfying, but I just got 7 points. Oh, you got 12 points. That works on a gut level. That, triggers our lizard brain responses that are all about scarcity avoidance, right? You have more points than me. In the same way, you have more berries from the bush than I do that we were both picking. This just fires on our brains. And I think ultimately that is more important to bring people in. I think point systems are better for universal gameality than objective systems. But I got off topic. I go with worker placement because, generally speaking, a point system, I want a game. I think the game is going to be better suited if it's not a really simple game. If it's simple enough that everybody can pick up and play. I'm going to assume a gateway-ish type game. I guess what I'm really saying is, what is better as a gateway game? Ticket to Ride or Lords of Waterdeep? Lords of Waterdeep, maybe not the greatest gateway worker placement game of all time, but a strong candidate. At the end of the day, Ticket to Ride, I am abstracted. I do not have an avatar in the world. Yes, maybe those are my trains, but I don't feel like that's me. As soon as I've got a little meeple, a little humanoid character or a cute little fuzzy critter or whatever it might be, and I put that on the board, that gives me something that I have connection to in a much more meaningful way because I will tend to anthropomorphize that character. It is very, very common to start to have an emotional relationship with your workers. If as they do stuff, if they die, for example, in some games like Village and whatnot. I mean, Jen can't play Village because she gets too attached to her workers, and they will eventually grow old and die, and it was just painful for her to play. Maybe Jen was being more sensitive, but I do think those feelings will still hit anybody on a deep guttural level, whether they're bothered by it or not. We will still respond to it because this is getting into raw, really base human psychology. And so I think workers give you the sense of, this is something I talked about last time, right? You need agency. You need to have something like, okay, this is a system, and I need to be able to exert my influence on this system to be able to achieve my goals, even if those goals are just points, right? So a worker placement game is a really very straightforward, to-the-metal way to do that, although there's a million flavors you can throw on worker placement. It's so flexible. But it gives you that, and it puts you in this kind of upper middle manager disembodied voice, but still gives you characters you can attach to and relate to. And you could even pretend are you, like viticulture. Do most people think the Grande? Oh yeah, well the Grande, that's me. And then those other ones are my assistants, that kind of a thing. I think any time that a game can create those kind of human social connections between you and the tools that you use to exert your influence into the simulation, which is ultimately going to be what's ultimately satisfying, the fact that I feel like I have made a difference in this little world. And that's why I think worker placement comes out on top and victory points come out on top over objectives. That's literally off the top of my head, but you let me know what you think. You know where I am, questions@rahdo.com. Okay, question 4, Gloomhaven continued. Your listing of dungeon crawlers and adventure games on the Board Game Geek Top 100 just proves my point. Oh, this is continuation from last month. There are only... Daniel, I guess I probably misunderstood your point again if what I said proves your point. Let me see if I can understand your point. There are only Gloomhaven and Mage Knight that are heavy, thinky, tactical dungeon crawls and adventure games. Clank is too light, too many bones is Ameritrash through and through. I don't think you're giving too many bones enough credit there, but that's okay. Why aren't there more? Because they haven't been designed yet. Not because people don't like them. Or are you saying that the depth of Gloomhaven for a dungeon crawler has very little to do with its success? Would it be in your top 10 if it wasn't as deep and offering as a lot of choices return? It certainly wouldn't be in mine, no matter how huge it is. Okay, well, first of all, Daniel, I apologize. In the future, by all means, please sum up, because you're writing that email probably minutes or hours after I responded to a thing that you wrote 2 months ago and I responded to a month ago, and now I don't remember this conversation at all. So, I guess I'll try to rewind a little bit, because I do remember broadly there was this back and forth, and I remember I brought up a list and said, hey, there aren't very many of these, and you're saying, yeah, see, there aren't very many of them. And I thought you were saying, well, it doesn't matter. Past is in the past. Let's continue forward. Why do I think Gloomhaven hit so hard? I think Gloomhaven hit so hard and rose to the top and is spawning a generation of games that take a long time to develop but that are trying to catch up. You see a half a dozen of them a year, easily. And you would see more of them, your Oathsworns, your Dwellings of Eldervale, what's the new one that just came out? Kimberly just covered it. Based on the Elder Scrolls, right? There are tons of these games coming out, following on the footsteps of two games, really, Gloomhaven and Kingdom Death Monster. Right? And now everybody, every publisher wants to have a game or two that are a big, gigantic box full of hundreds of hours of gameplay that surprise you with their depth and complexity, where such things were unthinkable before. That's the situation we're in now. And the only reason we don't see more of them is because they're really, 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 really hard to make. So, but back to Gloomhaven. Is Gloomhaven number one? And are other people trying to follow in his footsteps? Because obviously people want to make money, and they love Gloomhaven. There's a lot of reasons to do it. But did Gloomhaven make it to the top because of its complexity, because of its size, because of its length, because of its a ridiculously low price? When it came out, it was under $100. Can you believe that? And yet it had 300 hours worth of gameplay in it. Why did Gloomhaven make it to the top is really the core question, I guess. Because I don't... Because you ask, am I saying the death of Gloomhaven for a dungeon crawler had little to do with its success? Oh, no. Well, first of all, there's two types of success. We were talking about the Board Game Geek Talk 100. That's a very simple and myopic lens to look at a game's success. The most successful selling board games, any given year, none of them make it into the top 1,000 of Board Game Geek, the top 5,000 of Board Game Geek, and they never will. So Board Game Geek is only a reflection of a very, very tiny fraction of the total board game players there are in the world and what they like. So I guess it probably doesn't make sense to articulate, to really drill down on why was Gloomhaven successful amongst board game geeks to make it so fast to the top 100. The bigger question is, why does it sell so much, considering how incredibly expensive it is? And that's a fair question, because it's not just board game geeks buying it. So I'm sure there are probably the majority of people who back it do not have a BoardGameGeek.com account to be able to rate anything, because, or I wonder if it is. That's a really good question. That would be a great question to put to Isaac if he has any kind of metrics. What percentage of people who buy the game are diehard Board Game Geek aficionados? I would say there are, like anything in life, it's never one simple thing. That's never the case. Anybody who says, oh, this complex scenario, I've narrowed it down to one thing that defines it, they're lying to you. They haven't. It's never as simple as that. There's a lot of things that go into Gloomhaven's success. Not the least of which, to be honest, is FOMO, is fear of missing out. Because, how well did the original Gloomhaven do on Kickstarter? The one that I covered a billion years ago, back when I still had, when I wasn't entirely gray-haired. Kickstarter, Gloomhaven. Let's go back to the browser. Let's go back to... All right, there's the second edition. No, I don't want back... I want to go deep. I want to go... no, I don't want to go to 2020. Is this the original one? Right. Last updated... I think this is the original one, where... Yes, in the original one, you could get Gloomhaven for $65. Oh, my goodness gracious. And it did really well. It had 4,900 backers. Here's the deal. That's not that great. That's good. That's great. That's great for board games. But you have to remember, I would not be surprised at all if Isaac Childress took a loss on the original Gloomhaven if he was selling it to 1,300 people for $64 and 3,200 people for $80. Granted, this was a long time ago. Cost of goods for everything in the universe have gone up precipitously since then and continue to rise, both for traditional economic reasons and also for the unusual times we're living through. But even still, the original one did 4,900. That's good. That's a good, solid hit. That is not barn burning. That is not selling, 15 or 20 or 30,000. Let's see. How did the follow-up do? Let's see. Isaac on board. No, that's the wrong thing. I want the 5 things he's created. So the second printing of Gloomhaven had 40,000 backers. And that was just a few years later. Right? I don't know when. 2017. And what was the original one? Is that like 3 years later? I bet you. Because I want to say 2014 is when I originally played Gloomhaven for the first time and talked for hours to Isaac about what I loved and what I didn't love and all that. You remember that? You remember that call, Isaac? Oh, man. Those are good times. I do not see. All right, 2015. It must have been 2014. So 3 years later, people have finally gotten Gloomhaven, and then they go for a second bite at the apple, and they go from 4,900 to 40,000. And so what explains that? I think that's probably the single most interesting thing to evaluate, right? And honestly, it's FOMO. It's fear of missing out. Because by that point, there is a famous a book about marketing, which I read many, many years ago, back when I was still in the video game industry. And one of my managers wanted me to read it because I was designing games and they wanted me to design games to be successful. And I do not remember the name of the book, but it introduced the concept of mavens. Maven's marketing term. All right. The definition of Maven. There were like several different types of users, and they were defined. Maybe Maven existed before then. I mean, people. I was hoping. Come on. Origin of marketing term Maven. It's derived from. Yes. Okay. What book introduces? That wasn't The Digital Evolution, because this was a book that I read. Gosh, I want to say even before the 20-teens, in the, maybe even in the 90s I read it. What is the origin of the word Maven? No, not Old English. All right, you know what? It would take me forever to find this book now. I did read it, and it was really eye-opening at the time. And I don't remember the name of it. I don't remember the majority of it. And apparently it has now become so ubiquitous that nobody even references the book. And whoever wrote the book that came up with this, Maven, because there were like 2 or 3 different types. And Maven was the one that really stuck with me. But there are trendsetters. I think maybe that's what Mavens were, or Mavens were somebody else. But there are these different types of consumers. And if you get them on your side, they will drive support. And that's what happened with the original Gloomhaven. The original Gloomhaven was a moderate success. It probably lost Isaac Childress money, probably almost bankrupted him. So he had to make 5,000 of them, and he was definitely undercharging. I'm sure he was had a rude awakening on that one. But then, still, the game came out, and it was more than anything else. I think the thing that really stood out from Gloomhaven when people finally got their hands on it is they'd never seen anything like it. It was novelty. It was novelty plus value. This is, wow, this really crunchy Euro-style gameplay mixed with, not a single die anywhere to roll in my dungeon crawl. We've been playing dungeon crawls forever. We've had them going back to Arkham Horror in the 80s and stuff like that. There's never been a dungeon crawl quite like this. That's not to say this was the first dungeon crawl that had Euro-style mechanisms. There were plenty. Oh, I feel so bad for Perdition's Mouth, which was another really crunchy Euro-driven game that was crowdfunding right around the same time as Gloomhaven, and Gloomhaven stole all its thunder. Too bad, so sad. Because Perdition's Mouth was a really cool, but Perdition's Mouth had a terrible title. That's a horrible, horrible title. Gloomhaven is a good title. So marketing 101 stuff. But Gloomhaven really introduced players to, wow, I haven't had an experience like this. And what you said, I get 300 hours of gameplay for this. This is the ultimate example of value. I think it's those two things combined more than anything else that propelled that second edition of Gloomhaven into the stratosphere. And once you're in the stratosphere, you are a self-fulfilling prophecy. People buy the game because, I have to buy the game because everybody else bought the game, because everybody just knows you get that game. And that's why it continues to be at the upper echelon now. You see this all the time with TV shows, with movies, with anything, with cars, with anything that people can consume, with fast food franchises. They reach the tipping point. Is that the name of the book? Oh my gosh, I think it is. I knew I'd get there. Yes. The Tipping Point. How little things can make a big difference. When did this book come out? It was originally 2002. Who's the author? I want to give credit where credit is due. It was a really good book. Author. Malcolm Gladwell. Oh, of course, Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was The Tipping Point that I read. And maybe he didn't introduce or invent these concepts, but he certainly popularized them. He made the ideas in The Tipping Point reach their tipping point to where they are now, just de facto dogma for how things work in the world. And he's obviously made an entire career out of The Tipping Point. I'm pretty sure that was the book. I'm pretty sure. If it's wrong, I apologize. Somebody can tell me, send to questions.rahdo.com if I got that wrong. But anyway, things reach a tipping point, and then they just become a self-fulfilling thing. They become their own engine for success. And Gloomhaven hit it. Why? I think novelty plus value and enough mavens, if that isn't correct, the right turn, is what put that over the top. I don't know if that answers the question, but if not, Daniel, you can remind me next month, and we will continue. But definitely remind me of what I said, because I don't know what I said, and I don't know what it was answering. But anyway, we're going to move on to question Number 5. As a fellow hater of deck construction, high five, Daniel, is there some type of deck construction that would work for you? For example, you have your hero deck, aspect deck, personality deck, you pick your hero, pull 2 random aspects, pick one, pull 2 random personality cards, pick one, shuffle all together, no changing of individual cards. Yeah, that's totally cool. I love that kind of stuff. Like I said, I think this came up because I was talking about Magic the Gathering, what kind of players we used to be. About the only way I could enjoy after the initial excitement and enthusiasm for Magic the Gathering wore off, and I realized, I kind of hate this deck building. Deck building, for definition's sake, means, hey, you're constructing a deck during play. That's a deck builder. A deck constructor means outside of play, you build the ideal deck. That's Magic the Gathering. That's Marvel Champions, etc. Just for definition's sake. And deck construction, I find no interest because to me it feels like work. But what you just did with your example, and I have played plenty of games that do this, and it's what I tended to do when I would still play Magic the Gathering in sealed deck tournaments, is you've turned the act of deck construction into its own game. How do you turn into a game? By introducing rules. It's not a game if there are no rules that I have to navigate to work within to be able to succeed or fail. And you've gamified the act of deck construction by saying, oh, well, look, you have to do this and that, and you have to have 5 of these and 2 of this and that and the other. Now, of course, Magic the Gathering has that. I forget what it is. You can't have more than X of a type of card. You can't have more than X cards total. But those are very broad and vague. But if you give me, hey, look, here's 5 choices you have to make of this, and this. I'm like, oh, those 2 and this and that and the other. To me, that's a blast. That's a hoot. That's why I love Agricola so much. Agricola, you could kind of think of as a deck construction game very vaguely because, hey, the game gives you 21 cards right from the get-go if you play the way we play. Or, I'm sorry, 28 cards, 14 and 14? Yeah, I believe that's right. And then we're going to narrow it down to, I forget the exact numbers, but regardless. But still, it's all about, right, okay, I've got all these cards. I'm going to ignore all those cards. This is my deck of cards. This is what I'm actually going to try to make work. And, the more you constrain me, that's what I love in games anyway. The more you constrain me and force me to work within parameters, the more enjoyment I'm going to have because you're giving me a problem to solve. And that's what feels good. That's what fires the dopamine in our brains. It makes us feel smart that we were presented with a problem and we overcame that problem. That's why Sudoku puzzles are so popular. That's why crossword puzzles are so popular. That's why board games. That's truly the secret magic of board games. That plus social. Although, again, social is a secondary because solo board games are a thing and they're here to stay. And anybody who says otherwise, you're being a snob. Social is definitely number 2. Problem solving is number 1 why board games are compelling and compulsive. And so you designed a really cool little deck construction problem for me to solve, and I would enjoy it. But give me 300 cards to choose from and only give me a couple of very broad, vague things, and then make me have to play that deck in a series of 30 minutes as I slowly find out if it's good or not. That's just tedium to me. So yeah, I think deck construction, when properly gamified, is fantastic. Okay, and look no further than Agricola. Alrighty. And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.